filter to each of my slices of my face. And now I want to start getting into more squares. Something I'm going to do to help me kind of even these out a little bit and stick with the same size is I'm going to add some guides to my pictures. Now, my ruler is already showing. Yours probably will not be showing by default. So you're going to go up to View, and you're going to come down to Rulers. Mine's already checked off, so I don't have to do that. And the way you can add guides, guys, is by clicking and dragging on whatever ruler is going the same direction. So if I wanted horizontal guides to really even these out, they're bright blue lines, and you just drag them down from there. Now, I don't need that. You can also delete guides. Say if I accidentally made too many, if I click on them, they turn dark blue, just hit delete. So I'm going to space out some fun squares by dragging from my vertical ruler, creating these vertical guides. And I don't want to make too small of squares because that'll make my life harder. So now as I'm working, I'm going to go from the top down again. I can change these bits by selecting. It'll only affect what's on that layer, so it makes it helpful that you're not changing the whole thing. And now what we're going to get into is some of the color modes. If I go up to Image, up at the top of the bar, there's a couple different things. Mode, for the most part, you're either going to be working in RGB or CMYK. We'll talk about that later. But you're going to be messing around in adjustments. Adjustments have to do with how color and light are perceived. This top chunk of things is all light and contrast and darks and lights, how that's perceived. They're usually used for camera settings. All of these are related to color and how intense the color is. These are a little more advanced. They focus on limiting or reversing colors. And we're not really going to work too much with these ones down here because there are functions in these two that incorporate those. So let's take a look at brightness and contrast. Brightness and contrast does what it says it does. If you crank up the lever on brightness, watch what happens. Shock of all shocks, it gets brighter. Contrast makes more sense when you're trying to make things stand out more. I want you to watch the shadows in my hair when I pump up the contrast. They get darker. So you can play around with that there. Anytime you want to deselect something, Command D. So now I've got a piece that's lighter. I could come in, Image, Adjustments. If I go to Levels, that has to do more with highlights, shadows, and midtones. If I click on this middle arrow and drag it towards one or the other, it can become darker or lighter. So that's a function there. Command D to deselect, because remember, we're doing different things for each of these pieces. Let's go to Adjustments. Curves have to do with lighting as well. You can click and drag this lovely little line to get different effects. And you can also just click to deselect things, guys. Exposure is how much light is let into the camera lens. I'm not really going to worry about that one right now. Well, I guess I could do it over here. We'll do it here. Now, I switched slices, so I need to come down to my eyebrows layer. Otherwise, nothing will happen to that. Let's go to Adjustments, Exposure. If I crank it, it goes all the way to white. Really depending on what you're doing. Now notice, for the most part, these all stayed in the same color family. They just changed in terms of lighting intensity. What we're going to do now is we're going to change some colors. So if I go to Image, Adjustments, and Hue and Saturation, this is where I can start to get like funky green hair. There's a couple other cool features of that particular thing. Like say I just want to change a certain color. Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. We'll talk about this more in the Adjustments palette lesson, but if you click on this little hand here, you can change just certain shades. Say I only want to change things that are reddish, and there, this limiter pops up, and now when I drag that bar, I mean they're all kind of reddish. That's a bad square to show you that on, but we'll come back to that in another project. So I can play around with color balance and change the warm and cool tones of something. I can play around with how vibrant something is. I can change it to black and white, like that. And I can keep going and keep going. Some of them you might want to leave the same, just for variety, but it's your job to go through each of these. This is what happens when you're on the wrong layer, by the way, guys. Nothing will happen. But I want you to go through each of these adjustments and see which bit you would like to apply to your patchwork.